of nervous energy, harness the power of your anxiety. We're going to be talking all about how to leverage anxiety to help you be a better leader, to be a more successful human being, to be happier, all that fun stuff. We are broadcasting for the third time on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and on Clubhouse all at the same time, which is super, super exciting. And I'm going to start asking you questions in just a moment. But as always, thanks to my amazing Christina, my amazing apprentice, Christina, our producer, we are going to be giving away prizes throughout the show. Christina is going to be choosing 3 people that are going to win copies of Chloe's brand new book, Nervous Energy. The only way to win is to share a comment on LinkedIn. So feel free to let us know where you're watching from on LinkedIn. You can also let us know any questions that you have for Chloe. You can let us, I'm going to invite some mods up here on the Clubhouse side. This is fun producing on multiple places at the same time. You can let us know any questions you have for Chloe or me. We're going to go for about 20-25 minutes. And remember, every time you post a comment or question on LinkedIn, you enter to win a copy of the book. So with that said, Chloe Carmichael is a clinical psychologist, has a thriving practice, a fellow entrepreneurs organization member, which means she has to have a very, very good business, and is the author of the brand new Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. Dr. Chloe, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks, Dave. It's super great to be here with you.
So my first question is, and I love to ask authors this question, why this book and why now? Tell me why you wrote this book and what the key lesson that you want folks, readers, to take away from Nervous Energy.
Well, Dave, the reason I wrote the book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, is because as a clinical psychologist in New York City, I was getting really kind of overfull. There was no way that I could possibly really meet the demand for all the people that were coming in for my help with anxiety. And I think the reason that they were all coming in is because I was doing something a little different. I was taking a slightly different approach. And that is part of the key takeaway that I do want people to get from Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, which is that anxiety is not always a bad thing, right? So anxiety actually gives us this little zing, this little boost. It's a normal, natural, healthy thing. In fact, we wouldn't look both ways before we cross the street if we didn't have a little bit of anxiety. So a lot of really on point, high achieving people have anxiety. The trick is to just make sure that we know how to kind of funnel or harness or channel that anxiety into something constructive. And that is the main thing that I'm bringing to the table through, I used to do it through private sessions, and now I'm doing it through the book.
Love it. I know a lot of people feel like they're paralyzed by anxiety. They feel like it makes it harder for them. How can folks that are nervous about their anxiety, that don't like their anxiety, how can they do a 180 on that? How can they instead see their anxiety as a positive thing? I mean, I know right before I do a big speech or a big interview or have a big pitch to investors, I feel a rush of energy. I'm not sure if that's anxiety or what that is, but I feel this big rush. Because I don't think I get anxious myself, but I definitely understand a lot of people struggle with anxiety. How can they turn it around and instead of seeing it as a struggle, just use it as a superpower?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is really just in what we think we know about anxiety. And so you're absolutely right, Dave. That big rush that we get before we say go on stage is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of that nervous energy. In fact, one of the stories I share in the book is where I actually didn't know how to handle that boost myself. And I was going on to the Nancy Grace show at, national television, one of my first times as a psychologist. And I actually had a panic attack right there on the air because I had that little zing and I didn't know what to do with it. And it took me by surprise. So I think to answer your question, the first thing that people need to do to kind of get there is to realize that it can be done, to kind of put it into your mental blueprint that anxiety actually doesn't always equal bad. And then we can do a little bit more legwork in advance to make it super easy for us to know how to use that boost. So, for example, Dave, you're a natural, you don't need this. But if you were somebody that got that zing before you went on stage and didn't know what to do with it, we would want to give you a checklist of like, okay, here are the 5 things that I must always do before I go on. I'll, do my vocal warm-ups, I'll review my talking points, and I'll check my reflection in the mirror. And then when you have certain behaviors and things that you're doing that you know what to do with that extra energy, that's when it becomes something that works in your favor rather than even just an obstacle to be managed. It actually becomes a boost for you.
Love it. If you're just joining us, I am live on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and Clubhouse with Dr. Chloe Carmichael, clinical psychologist and author of the about to be released tomorrow, A Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. Super exciting. And I have our very first winner. Remember, the only way to win is to post a comment or question. Congratulations, Mikey Dunn from New York City. Send us your info and we'll get a copy of the book out to you. Mikey Dunn, thanks for posting on LinkedIn. Dr. Chloe, this is kind of a yes, no, but I guess you can expand upon it. If people have anxiety, should they try to reduce their anxiety or eliminate their anxiety? Or is it better to embrace their anxiety? Like which is let's say somebody that's listening right now or watching right now really does struggle with anxiety. What's the better direction? Eliminate the anxiety or accept and embrace the anxiety and try to just make it a positive thing?
Yeah, so Dave, that is such a good question. That's really like truly the $1,000,000 question. So with certain types of situations when we have anxiety, sometimes the best thing to do is just, deep breathing, calm yourself down, learn to just kind of bliss out and detach from the stressor. And other times when we're dealing with anxiety, that would be the worst possible thing we could do. Sometimes when we're dealing with anxiety, what we actually need to do is become very effective and very focused, upon the situation causing the stressor. So there's not going to be a one size fits all answer about, what's the best thing to do with anxiety. But the first thing to do to figure out which type of situation it is, if it's a lean in or a let go type of a situation, is the first thing we want to do is study it. And so that's why in the book, I offer 9 techniques. And I explain in the book that really they're all optional. You can choose whichever ones work for you, with the exception of the first one, because the first one actually it's kind of a metacognition exercise that teaches you to look at the anxiety and look at yourself and try to identify, is this a situation like, for example, say you submitted an application for a job, and at that point, thinking about it any further is just going to be wasted energy and ruminating. That's when you need to learn to just detach and let yourself wind down. On the other hand, if you're anxious before you have submitted the application, that's when your anxiety could be giving you a really healthy tickle to review the application, maybe do 1 or 2 other things to improve it before you press send. So that's a really good question, Dave, as to whether we want to lean in or let go. And the answer is going to depend on the situation.
Cool. Thank you, Dr. Chloe. And speaking of questions, we are getting some questions that are coming in on LinkedIn, which is great. I'm going to go to them in just a moment. I also want to experiment with questions from Clubhouse. So if you have a question for Dr. Chloe and you're listening on Clubhouse right now, you can raise your hand if you're in the audience, or you can flash your mic if you're on stage. Cool. So we will go to some questions in just a moment. And then in a little while, as always, we'll also get to the Likeable pyramid and talk about the traits of likable leadership. But for now, let's stay on the topic here. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that watch our show and I guess listen to our show now. What would you say? How does anxiety differ, if at all, in entrepreneurs, and what specific insights or advice would you share for entrepreneurs that deal with anxiety?
So, yeah, as an entrepreneur myself, I do think that our anxiety can be a little bit more intense sometimes because it's so deeply personal, right? So, it's almost like when an artist who's just making art for a hobby, it's one thing. But if they're going to start taking that art and bringing it to the marketplace and suddenly, experiencing the brutal marketplaces, just, review and feedback over their art, that can be so personal, right? And so I think the same thing is true for us entrepreneurs. For many people, that are maybe having a bad day at work, that's one thing. They get to just kind of come home and focus on something else. But for those of us whose business actually is something that we personally created, presumably out of some drive or passion around what we're doing and what we're building, and our identity is really entwined with it, I do think that the anxiety can, kind of get a little bit more intense. And I do have some tips for entrepreneurs. So, it just depends on the situation, obviously. But one of the things I think is so important is to have buy-in from your family. So whether it's your family, your partner, your community, we entrepreneurs can get so consumed with what we're doing, and we can accidentally push away our social supports, including our family, if we're not careful. At the same time, of course, we do have to sometimes just immerse ourselves in our business and kind of drop out of family life for a little while if something comes up and it's an emergency. And so communication there, I think, is really the key. So to be able to go to your family and communicate and say, look, I know I'm kind of MIA right now. The reason is I'm trying to build a business that's going to take care of our family. So even though I'm focused on the business right now, I'm actually really focused on the family. And even just connecting those simple dots for, your social support network, I think can help to, stop that snowball effect of where we get consumed in work and then we feel isolated from our social support network. And then it just goes downhill from there. So we really want to make sure we communicate.
Awesome. Thank you for those tips. The questions are scrolling in, coming right in on LinkedIn, and I know we have some folks on Clubhouse that want to ask as well. My first question, Dr. Chloe, comes from, and I'm sorry if I don't get your name right. I'm going to guess Vihila Richard, who is saying, in short, is your position that, or are you saying that anxiety can be used as a position force? I don't know what that phrase position force is, but maybe you do. So that's the first question. Dr. Chloe, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like you said, Dave, I don't know that phrase position force, but yes, I am saying that in short, anxiety can be used to put you in a position of force. You can be coming from a very powerful position if you do have a little anxiety, which I think is so important. Many people are just primed to think of it as a weakness. And then they get anxiety about anxiety because they're like, oh no, I have anxiety. I must be, weak. And then they get anxiety about that. Whereas actually, again, a person with no anxiety would actually be apathetic. You'd be like a bump on a log, right? So a little bit of healthy anxiety and discomfort and concern about the future is what propels us and stimulates us to make what psychologists call preparation behaviors. So let's not, give anxiety a bad rap. As the, questioner said, it can absolutely put us in a position of strength.
Awesome. Makes sense to me. Christina, let's choose another winner if we could. Somebody that is commenting or asking a question on LinkedIn. While she does that, Gurmeet, all the way from New Delhi that's watching, wants to know if physical workouts or meditation help address anxiety. Physical workouts or meditation.
Yeah, physical workouts and meditation are both great. So, again, what anxiety does is it can even give us that little extra shot of adrenaline. It can put us in that fight or flight type of a mode. And so, we might just actually be using that adrenaline energy to review a report or call a friend and have an important conversation that needs to be had. But we don't actually necessarily need all the adrenaline that maybe anxiety has provided us, because maybe our body is still calibrated back from the caveman days when we think we need to actually outrun a lion. So definitely, exercise is a really great way to just burn off some of that extra adrenaline and energy that Mother Nature can give to us. And meditation is another huge one. So when I mentioned at the beginning of the book that there's a metacognition technique, it's actually also a mindfulness and meditation technique. So a lot of people hear mindfulness and they think like, oh, new age woo-woo stuff. Like, I don't want to get into that. And so I found that describing it as actually a form of metacognition, which is also what meditation is, which is where you're observing your thoughts, that kind of insight and knowledge about your own cognitive patterns is actually super valuable. So yes, yes, yes to the exercise and meditation.
Love it. And I know you're very humble, Dr. Chloe, but when it comes to meditation, somebody no less than Dr. Deepak Chopra has endorsed your book, Nervous Energy. So that's really exciting. If you're joining me just now, I am live with Dr. Chloe Carmichael, entrepreneur and best-selling author, well, soon to be best-selling author of Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Own Anxiety. Our next winner of that book is Liz from Las Vegas. Congratulations, Liz from Las Vegas. And we will get a copy of the book out to you. Before we go to the Likeable Pyramid, I'm going to open it up to questions from Clubhouse. So Clubhousers, I ask that you share your question really quickly, and I'm going to repeat them for the folks that are watching the live stream, because I'm not sure whether the audio will go very well. So Joy, thank you for flashing your mic. You are up. What is your question for Dr. Chloe Carmichael?
Just more anxious than ever. I know some people used to use the word anxiety as a funny term, like, oh my gosh, this color is giving me anxiety. I broke my nail, I have anxiety, but it's a real thing. Do you see an increase of real anxiety because of COVID?
Yeah,
Great.
definitely.
I'm just, Dr. Chloe, I just want to repeat the question real quick for those that are watching that may not have heard it. Joy's question was, are you seeing an increase in anxiety during this global pandemic, like statistically speaking? And you're up.
Yeah, so I would definitely say in my experience, anxiety has gone on the rise, because just to the point of the previous person about exercise, number one, people just don't have as much opportunity to get that exercise. So we have some pent up stress hormones. Our ability to have social support, to pop in the gym, to just connect with each other and debrief, from our day has certainly been changed. And I know a lot of us have had, a lot of outsized concerns about the health of our globe and our community in ways that we didn't have previously. So definitely anxiety is on the rise. But again, to me, the good news is that we can think about how we can use that energy for a constructive purpose. I really believe we can.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, flash your mics if you're on stage and have a question for Dr. Chloe on Clubhouse, or feel free to raise your hand if you're in the audience and you have a question. I'm going to go next to Mallory. Mallory, what's your question for Dr. Chloe Carmichael?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Steve. So I have a question about social anxiety. And when you're in groups, large groups of people, not necessarily if you're getting up on stage, or more so if you have to get, not because you're afraid of flying, but you have to go through TSA in the airline, where you have to go to a concert. And I question what that is, because I don't really call it anxiety as much as I don't want to be around a lot of people. But I think somebody else might say, no, you're suffering from social anxiety disorder or whatever. You can put a label on it, but I'm curious how you feel about that. Is it normal to not want to be in large groups of people? Normal being, tongue in cheek.
So that's a great question. A few thoughts on that one. So in terms of social anxiety, and I get what you're saying that you're not sure if it is or not, but a lot of people have had increases in social anxiety just because we've been around people less. And so it can feel a little unnerving. So, one thing that I would encourage people to do who are thinking maybe they're having social anxiety is that when you do get into a group of people, to just simply challenge your brain to locate 5 signs of social acceptance, right? So that could be anything from eye contact, somebody smiling, somebody saying hi, even just open body language towards you. And that helps to interrupt that negative, anxious monologue of just, kind of scanning for fear or trouble. I think we've all been so programmed to be somewhat fearful of each other even lately because of, what may have even started as legitimate concerns about the virus. The back of our brain, our unconscious mind, can kind of morph that into something altogether bigger. So one thing we can do is to just challenge ourselves to start focusing and quickly locating 5 signs of social acceptance, because at least that will keep our attention pointed on signs of social connection rather than things that could, be socially fearful. Another thing that I would say to just consider, and again, I get what you're saying, that Mallory, that you're not totally sure, what this is or where it's coming from. Part of it could also be just what we call in psychology behavioral activation, right? So just simply because you haven't been around a concert or a TSA and you're describing these kind of large gatherings that you just haven't had in a while, it could be normal that it's just normal to be a little anxious the quote first time that you go back to some of these things. So you might want to just, maybe challenge yourself to do it 10 or 15 times before you start really evaluating and determining, necessarily thinking that you're specifically anxious or that something has changed. It could just be a matter of just, getting your feet wet. And one last, point I would make about this is that sometimes it's about actual fears. Like, so, and again, I don't know your situation. I don't think it would be social anxiety if you're saying, well, I'm actually having these unconscious, or back of the brain monologues about fears of getting COVID, for example. And so if that were the case, I wouldn't be focusing on signs of social acceptance as much as I might be thinking about thought replacements, which would be coming up with some pre-crafted statements for yourself, like, I'm a strong and healthy person, and I'll get help if I need it. And just repeating that to yourself several times. If in fact, what's underlying the concern is, fears of medical issues rather than actually social anxiety. So, Mallory, my heart goes out to you that you're saying you're not exactly sure what it is. Sometimes we do have to just try a few things on for size, and then we figure it out as we go along.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, this is really exciting that we're getting so many questions and interest from Clubhouse, because I'm used to doing the LinkedIn Live where we get some questions from LinkedIn, but not from all sorts of different sources. But thanks for bearing with me, everyone. If you're just joining us live, I am with Dr. Chloe Carmichael, clinical psychologist, entrepreneur, and author of the about to be released Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. We're having a great talk about how to use anxiety to actually benefit you. And I'm really loving it, and grateful that we have you here today. All right, because the conversation's going so well, I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to go to the Likeable Pyramid that I do with all of my guests on the show. Jeff, I saw you flash your mic. Did you have a question for Dr. Chloe?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Dave. Hey, Dr. Chloe. So we talked a little bit earlier about how, especially in moments when leading up to something kind of exciting or big, like Dave, like talked about presentations or meetings with investors or whatever, going live on a television appearance, as you mentioned, we have that nervous rush of energy that you talked about. Well, I was curious if you had any tips or advice on handling that in that very moment. The best tips and ways to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm going to say something that you're probably the first thought you're going to have is, oh, I've already tried that. But hear me out. Okay. So what it is getting a handle on your breathing. And a lot of people, when I see that, they're like, oh, Chloe, I've tried deep breathing before, and it didn't really move the needle for me, or and almost made things worse. And I do discover that a lot of times people basically just are doing like a deep gaping breath, and they're of course just making things worse, almost like hyperventilating. But in the book, I actually describe what's called the 3-part breath. And it's a very slow, intentional, deliberate breath that requires just enough of your cognitive attention to think about doing it, that it prevents you from having an anxious monologue. And then it also puts you in control of your body and makes sure that you're not basically short circuiting yourself on oxygen, right? Which kind of contributes to this. In fact, as I mentioned, I had that panic attack myself on Nancy Grace. And if you watch the clip, you'll actually see me doing a really quick round of the 3-part breath, like right there. And it was kind of how I rescued myself. Like I also mentioned with Dave, just thinking about that as a, workshop example before you go on the air or get into those high pressured situations. I would think about having an index card of all of your talking points, or even just planning something nice for yourself to unwind afterwards, so that you can think about what you're going to be doing to unwind afterwards, so that it kind of helps to keep that one moment from getting an outsized sense of importance in your mind, if you can start to remember and think about some of the stuff that's going to be happening next. But again, for me, the real trick is learning how to welcome that extra zing, and then just learning how to modulate it rather than thinking it's the enemy.
Love it. Okay. We have a lot of questions on LinkedIn, but I'm going to ask you, Dr. Chloe, if you don't mind going back later on and helping to answer some of the questions that don't get answered. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So if you're asking a question on LinkedIn and Chloe has not, and I have not gotten to asking her, she will get to it later on. And thank you so much for keeping those questions coming. I did invite a couple of others to the stage here in Clubhouse that had questions. Chioma, what is your question for Dr. Chloe?
Yes. Hey guys, again, Dr. Chloe. So I was wondering, because I'm a musician, so oftentimes when I perform, like that anxiety builds up, and so I've been lately trying to practice meditation. But I notice even during meditation, sometimes I even still get like that anxious, nervous energy. So my question to you is, how do you redirect that energy, like you said, so it can benefit you, and kind of just get your thoughts kind of all on the same pace?
Yes. Yeah, so I love that question. So when I feel like I can tell, though, by the way you asked it, that I think that there might be a part of you that's still thinking of that nervous energy as potentially like the obstacle rather than the springboard. So, you're like, oh, well, when I'm meditating, I still get a little bit of that nervous energy, right? Like as if it's like, oh, it's still there, like as if the goal is, whereas actually like there's a real benefit from it. So I would say when you're meditating and you notice that nervous energy, I would actually focus on it and ask yourself silently, like, does it have a color? Does it have a pulse? Does it have a texture? Can I take a deep breath and sing out a particularly strong, beautiful note and project that nervous energy right through my throat, right through my voice? Can I locate a point on the wall and send my voice propelled by the nervous energy right there, right? So I want you to use that energy as a springboard rather than thinking of it as something that is like in your way.
Thank you so much. That was great advice. I'm like writing this.
And that's a reminder that I'm supposed to say on Clubhouse when we're recording. And since we are, in fact, streaming live, I would consider this a recording. So a reminder to everyone that's listening on Clubhouse and speaking on Clubhouse, this is being broadcast simultaneously on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you have any concerns whatsoever, please talk to me right away. And if you are watching on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, then you should join our Clubhouse Club, the Likeable Business club by coming to Clubhouse and looking us up. And if you are listening in Clubhouse, well, then you should follow me on LinkedIn so that you can watch our amazing guests like Dr. Chloe Carmichael every week. Okay, I'm going to ask my producer, Christina, to bring up the Likeable Pyramid. Every week on Likeable Leaders, we take a look at the Likeable Business Pyramid and the 11 traits of likable leadership as defined by, well, me. So I'm going to go through them real quick for those folks that are listening or visually impaired. And then I'm going to ask you, Chloe, which trait resonates the most with you as a leader. But I also want to know from you guys, the viewers, which resonates the most with you. And in fact, our final winner, our grand prize winner, that's going to win both a copy of Dr. Chloe Carmichael's Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, and a copy of my last book, The Art of People, 11 Simple People Skills that will get you everything you want. You get both books, but the only way to win both books is to comment with your favorite likable leadership trait, the one that resonates the most with you, the person viewing this right now. So those traits are listening, storytelling, passion, teamwork, surprise and delight, responsiveness, simplicity, authenticity, transparency, adaptability, and gratefulness. Which of those 11 traits resonates the most with you as a leader? Post your comment. And while Christina is looking at your comments and getting ready to choose a grand prize winner, I will ask you, Dr. Chloe Carmichael, which resonates the most with you?
So, Dave, these are all obviously amazing. The one that I'm going to choose right now, though, is authenticity, transparency, because for me as a leader, I'm kind of thinking about that on a couple of levels. So obviously, I'm leading my employees, the team of wonderful people that make all of this possible. And I just feel like the more open I can be with them, the better that we all work together. It's just easier for me. But I also feel like I'm kind of a leader to the clients or readers of the book that I'm trying to teach how to turn their anxiety into a superpower or do whatever it is that they need to do. And one of the things, again, that I think is different about my approach and that informed it to the point where my practice grew to this level where I was able to join an entrepreneurs organization and write a book is because I talk to clients and readers of the book like they're intelligent, capable people, which for some reason a lot of psychologists just don't seem to do. So I noticed I also have a program where I teach therapists how to work with high functioning clients. And a lot of times the therapists will come to me and they'll be like, okay, so I'm working with this client and they're doing really great in this, but they're struggling with X, Y, and Z. And I just wish that they would do A, B, and C. How do I get the client to do that, Chloe? And I always tell them, you tell them exactly the way you just told me. You just tell them you're doing X, Y, and Z. Great. I wish I could figure out how to get you to do A, B, and C. I've been trying to figure out what more we could do to make that happen for you. And just tell it to the client just the way you just told me. And a lot of times the therapist will have this like aha moment when they realize that they can actually just talk to the clients like grown, intelligent adults, and that they'll be able to take that feedback and run with it.
Love it. Authenticity and transparency, of course, is one of my favorites as well. Actually, I recall the quote from my personal hero, the icon Oprah Winfrey, who said, if I'd realized how much money I would have made being my authentic self, I would have done it a lot sooner. And I think so many of us are nervous for some reason, or dare I say anxious for some reason, to embrace authenticity and transparency. And when we do, we realize, wow, it actually works pretty well as an actual leadership principle and communication principle. Okay, I wish I could have you all day, and I know there's lots of people listening and watching that have questions. So we have to wrap in just a moment. But Dr. Chloe, if I can get you to, I already got you to commit to answer people's questions on LinkedIn, and now if I can get you to commit to maybe coming back to the Likeable Business Club and doing another session, maybe even I'm thinking an Ask Dr. Chloe session would be really valuable and could help a lot of people. Plus, maybe we could help you sell a couple books too along the way. So, and plus, maybe I'll connect you with another favorite therapist, Dr. Sarah Renee Langley, who is hanging out in the room right now, and y'all could do something together. She's flashing her mic, so I'm hoping you're all in for it. I am going to wrap up as promised, but first, a couple of quick thank yous and our grand prize winner. I want to thank Christina, my apprentice and right hand woman who is taking a break from her vacation to join us and help produce this show. So thank you so much, Christina. I want to thank you, Dr. Chloe Carmichael, for joining us today and answering everyone's questions so articulately. And most of all, I want to thank you guys, the viewers and the listeners, for being here and spending so much of your precious time with me today. Our grand prize winner is Brad Caldwell from Wilmington. Brad from Wilmington, congratulations. You were not only watching on LinkedIn, you were also listening live on Clubhouse. So you're actually here. We've never been able to do this on LinkedIn, on our LinkedIn Live before, but Brad, we can go to you. Congratulations. You are a winner. Which was the principle that you shared, Brad?
Hey man, this is weird. Talking to me on LinkedIn while I'm on Clubhouse. It's authenticity for me, man. All day, every day. In fact, on our big board of ideas, we have a big board of ideas. We have a diagram for authenticity. To work on our team, you have to memorize the diagram. So when someone asks you what it is, you have a quick answer. Oh, I think it's the answer. Authenticity is the intersection of what you believe and how you behave.
Awesome. Love it. Congratulations, Brad. Thanks again, everyone, for joining me. We are back at you every Monday afternoon with Likeable Leaders. And until next time, have a super likable day, everyone.
Have a good one, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
So I can stay in here in the, sorry, I'm going to, one sec.